more on this now. We're going to cross to our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Hi there, Douglas. So first, can you just remind us about what this reform is?
The reform goes to the heart of whether or not the judicial branch will essentially have a check on the government and its ministers, the cabinet. This is a government, as we have said many times in the past, it's the most ultra-nationalist, ultra-conservative, religiously conservative government, a far-right government in Israel's modern history, really since its founding. The fear here being that if you remove that check on the government, it will be able to ride roughshod over Israeli democracy. That is the fear among the critics. What the law essentially does is it limits the ways in which the country's highest court, which is the Supreme Court, can basically overturn decisions of the government or the cabinet that it deems unreasonable. And this term I just used, unreasonableness, that's a real word. It's subjective. It's a legal concept. And what it essentially means is exactly that. If the judges on the Supreme Court deem that a law, a piece of legislation passed by the government or promoted by the government or its ministers, in this case, it would be the far-right government under Netanyahu, if it deemed it unreasonable under this law, it would be very limited in its ability to use that as a reason, as a pretext for overturning that law. It limits the Supreme Court's, it curtails the Supreme Court's ability to scrutinize the government decision. That is where the fears are directed here. And that's just one part of a broader judicial overhaul, but that is the key part of it. And that is the main thing, one of the main things that has brought so many tens of thousands to the streets, not for 1 week, but for 29 weeks running. And I will note the law was put on hold a few months ago, and it only sort of picked up in the past week or so ago after the government and the opposition failed to reach any compromise moving forward.
Now, many in Israel, nonetheless, Doug, see this as these mass protests, rather, as about a lot more than that judicial reform. Why is that?
Because they say more than a reform, this is about what Israel is about, what the Jewish state, so-called, is about, now and in the future. The nature of the Jewish state, the critics of this law see it as a sort of an existential threat in the sense that Israel, for many decades, at its founding, had a mostly left-wing, a mostly secular group of leaders at its helm, going way back to Israel's founding. And in more recent years, we've seen a switch, if you will, to the right of the spectrum. And that has created the rift, which has been widening, as you point out, between those and among the most of those on the streets right now who favor a more secular-minded, as they would see it, a more open, pluralistic society. So open, pluralistic, less emphasis on religious law, more emphasis on the Jewish character of the state, rather than any sort of religious imposition, a religious diktat, if you will. And that's what they say is happening under this government, or they fear is happening. They see it as a government that is right now very nationalist, very religiously conservative, with lots of ultra-Orthodox Jews who have taken Israel further, as they see it, from Israel's founding ideals as a more secular-minded state, Jewish in character, but not, in a sense, Jewish theocratically. And what I mean by that is the sense of Jewish law taking precedence. So they are fearful, in a way, of what they see as the growing influence and prominence in Israel of these ultra-Orthodox Jews, of the settler movement, a lot of the ultra-Orthodox, obviously, getting exemptions from military service. There's a lot of things dividing that society, but they say it's not just this reform. This reform is part and parcel of the broader picture of an Israeli society that is split right down the middle right now between that more nationalist, religious tenor and the more open, pluralistic, secular tenor that goes way back decades to the type of leaders that founded Israel.
Sounds like nothing but more instability then to come. Doug, we'll be keeping an eye on that vote then this Monday here on France 24. Thank you.